Welcome to this special Metals and Advanced Manufacturing Podcast edition. I'm your host, Jennifer Betts, and today we're diving into a fascinating chapter of recycling history that changed the game for the metals industry. Imagine a time when recycling an automobile meant hours of grueling, labor-intensive work with torches and shears. Enter the Prolerizer, a revolutionary invention that transformed how we recycle large-scale materials, like cars, making it faster and more efficient and paving the way for modern recycling processes. Recently, this groundbreaking piece of industrial history earned its place in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. And today, we'll explore why that's such a big deal. Joining me are two incredible leaders in the recycling industry. First, Robin Wiener, president of the Recycled Materials Association, has spent over 30 years championing the economic and environmental benefits of recycling while driving innovation and sustainability. We're also honored to welcome Becky Proler, president of SCR Recycling and a proud member of the Proler family, whose groundbreaking invention reshaped recycling as we know it. Becky has dedicated her career to improving processes and implementing cutting-edge technology in the industry. Together, we'll discuss the legacy of the Prolerizer, its impact on the industry, and how innovations like this continue to inspire the future of recycling and manufacturing. Let's dive in. Welcome to Metals and Advanced Manufacturing, the podcast where innovation meets industry. I'm Jennifer Betts, an entrepreneur in the metals industry. With 2 decades of experience from leading roles at Fortune 500 companies to building my own businesses, I bring you conversations with the brightest minds shaping the future of metals, technology, and sustainability. From breakthrough materials to decarbonization strategies and cutting-edge manufacturing, we uncover how industry leaders are building a more efficient, responsible supply chain. Let's get started. Now that we've set the stage for today's conversation, let me introduce our two guests, two trailblazers in the recycling industry who bring unique perspectives and decades of experience to the table. Becky Proler is co-founder and CEO of Southern Core Recycling, a family-owned scrap recycling facility in Houston. Becky grew up in the industry, working in all facets of the business. She works closely with her partners and management team to improve processes, purchase new equipment to use cutting-edge technology, leading SCR into the future. Becky enjoys serving on the REMA Gulf Coast Chapter Board. She holds a master's degree from Temple University. Robin Wiener is the president of the Recycled Materials Association, REMA, representing nearly 1,700 companies in the recycled materials industry. With over 30 years of experience, she leads efforts to promote the economic, environmental, and social benefits of recycling. Robin oversees strategic initiatives, compliance, and innovation while serving on advisory boards to advance the industry. She is a recognized leader and advocate for sustainability and the critical role of recycling in the U.S. economy and global trade. So please welcome these two incredible leaders to the Metals and Advanced Manufacturing podcast. Huge thank you to you both for joining today.
Thank you,
Thank you, Jennifer, for inviting us.
Because I understand that we have some travel coming up. Robin, spoiler alert for those that are listening to this, you will be traveling to India tomorrow for those that are listening and when this will be recorded. It's challenging, obviously, to get two of you in the same room at the same time with your careers, your travel, all of the work that you currently do in the industry. So just huge thank you for showing up today and wanting to discuss the history of what we're celebrating.
We're excited to do it. It's such an important development. And I'm grateful to be here alongside Becky as well, who is a phenomenal leader for the industry and has done so much to transform the industry to where we are today.
Agreed.
Well, I think that goes both ways. Robin, you've done a lot to transform our industry. And Jennifer, I really want to thank you and congratulate you on your podcast and on this new road that you're taking. It's very informative, and it really is very good for our trade association as well as for recyclers. The content that you give is very good, and I really appreciate your work in that area.
Well, I appreciate it because I've known you both for several years, and the knowledge that you have, and this goes for many of the REMA members that exist out there. I want it to be known for future generations what's possible out there. So it's a really great segue to one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you both. The Prolerizer was revolutionary for its time. So for those that are unfamiliar with it, could you paint a picture of what recycling looked like before this invention? Like, what challenges did the recyclers face at that time?
I was born, so was Robin, after the first Prolerizer, but not much. They started building it in 1957, and that's when it was tried. And then 1961 was the second shredder that is actually the one that is the Smithsonian has agreed to take some of the parts from. So, and it was just decommissioned this last year. It made it 62 years, I believe.
Wow.
And that's a hell of an ROI for any kind of piece of equipment. And so, I think before the Prolerizer, material was going through blast furnaces, and EAFs came into being in the 50s. And an EAF furnace was much cleaner, and it needed more material and metals that didn't have non-metallics in it. So Armco Steel in Houston reached out to my family. They were supplying Armco with various types of metals. And I think it was a problem that they were having, and my uncles and my father helped come up with a solution, which is really how a lot of things get done, if you think about it. That's more or less before scrap was very hard to keep clean. Imagine a car. How would you take the seats out? How would you get all the non-metallics out? How would you get the non-ferrous out? It's very, very difficult, right? So the idea was to size it with hammers and a motor that was big enough and grates, because there were shredders prior to the Prolerizer, but they didn't have all of those items that you needed in order to take a complete car and put it into a machine, and you come out with this size pieces. You could maybe tear pieces apart and put it through, but never could you take a complete car and within 30 seconds transform it into metal that could be used in an EAF furnace.
And it is amazing to hear Becky tell the story. I've known pieces of this, but it is such a great example of how innovative and entrepreneurial the industry is, because the solutions most often don't come from outside the industry. They come from within the industry, from the recyclers who may not have engineering degrees, although nowadays many do, but may not have an engineering degree or a PhD in chemistry, but based on their real world knowledge of the challenges with processing the material, the needs of our of consumers and manufacturers, they're able to come up with those solutions that really do make for an improved product, a safer product, a more environmentally friendly product, and one that manufacturers need and rely upon.
I think it's such a fascinating story. A lot of individuals in this industry probably think, that kind of collaboration doesn't necessarily happen, right? Between, the consumer and the supplier. So to hear that type of story where the consumer went to a supplier and said, help us on this. And just a quick little asterisk for any of the particular listeners that are listening that may not be familiar with an EAF is electric arc furnace. It's essentially a giant furnace that takes recycled material like metals and essentially remelts them into the new metal that's out there.
And it is amazing. You mentioned the electric arc furnaces. Electric arc furnaces, the steel that they produce, represents 70% of U.S. production. The manufacturing industries in the U.S. rely significantly on EAF steel. Although there's still basic oxygen furnaces being utilized and they use about 20% recycled ferrous, the vast majority of steel in the U.S. is made through electric arc furnaces. and they use the ferrous metal that comes out of shredders, the 300 shredders around the country that now exist. And so, we would not be able to have the level of production that we do in the US and the success of the steel making in the US without what evolved from the Prolerizer 60 something years ago. We're incredibly grateful for this innovation. It really did transform not just the recycled materials industry, but the manufacturing economy.
Absolutely. I think about that percentage, that ratio that you referenced there. And I think about one of the largest steel manufacturers that we have today in this country. And they didn't start using the EAF until after, obviously, the Prolerizer, that shredding technology existed, probably at least based on when the Prolerizer came around, 15, 20 years afterwards, because that they needed that steady supply of raw material to feed
Cor-
those furnaces. The United States wouldn't be where it's at using those types of raw materials without this type of
Correct.
invention.
Correct.
Yeah, and just real quickly, a spoiler alert for you. We're in the process of showcasing a video that's going to be made that really does talk about that history, where we've been and where it's going. It's going to have some really neat pictures. My family, I didn't even realize this. And that's what's so great about kind of going on this journey is I've learned a lot about my family as a result. And in the 70s, they had a commercial made. So you're going to get clips on that video that we're going to show at the Smithsonian. There's going to be clips of that commercial that was made. It's going to be something to watch. It's going to end up being a project for Robin. Rima's going to end up with the actual video at the end. And I do want to stress this. Without the networking that at the time ISIS or ISRI was involved in, you wouldn't see half of these companies that are out there. They met each other. Hugo New met my uncle at an ISIS or ISRI show in California. I believe it was in either San Francisco or Oakland. And that's how they met and formed a partnership that was at one point the largest in the world of scrap recycling. They were the first to, Hugo New Proler was the first to ship whole ship cargo loads to Japan, scrap. So having a trade association is absolutely essential, I think, to this sharing of ideas and problem solving solutions.
I didn't pay Becky.
Yes, not sponsored by Rima.
The Proler family owes a lot to trade associations because it really did help us meet people and reach out. And I have learned so much about my family, about my uncles, and about my grandfather by just searching and doing the research I had to do for the Smithsonian.
That tees me up perfectly for the next series of questions that I have. It's about the Proler family legacy. I mean, if you go to Texas and you're in the metals recycling industry, it's not uncommon to run into a Proler, right? Or somebody
So my
in that.
parents were Proler, yes.
Right, exactly. But I mean, your family has played a significant role in the metals recycling world, especially with the development of the polarizers. What lessons or values from your family's work still resonate with you today?
So, and I'm glad you asked that question because it's really very interesting. I encourage everybody out there, if you don't know much, if you're in a family business like I was, and you grew up in that, learn more about how it got started because there are things that I do and have done. And I didn't really realize, I mean, I grew up in a scrapyard. My father started taking me there when I was 6 years old. And I actually worked out in the yard. I know that's illegal now, but I didn't want to go into the office and play with I wanted to be out with the material. Two things kind of resonated for me as I was doing research for this. One, we get a new machine, we give it a name, like a baler, we name it, our shredder, we name it, because it's much easier for our employees to go to something that there's a name of and they feel that pride than to say, okay, you go to the shredder, you go to the baler. It's not the same thing. So what I found out when I was reading my uncle's book is that they used to name all of their equipment too. And I didn't know that. In fact, there's a picture of my grandfather and one of my uncles and a woman who is clearly an actress who's not a Proler, she's blonde. And they got her to sit on a bale. And it was the first 1,000-ton baler that they got from Ford. And they called the bale like Ben Bale, named after my grandfather. So that was one thing that I thought was really interesting. The second thing was whenever we would pour a new slab for like our shredder or we had a huge crusher, I would always put a potato sack in before they covered it up with concrete in the rebar. My grandfather, when he came here from Eastern Europe, and you've heard this story, Robin, a million times. People collected bones, they collected sacks, and then he would bring these potato sacks home to my grandmother, and she would redo them so that he could turn around and sell them the next day or whatever. So in honor of my grandfather, I would do that. When I'm talking to one of my cousins, and she was telling me the story that when my uncles would pour a slab for something at the shop, I'm sure for the first shredder, they would take money out of their pockets and throw it into the ground while they were pouring the concrete. They wanted all the employees to know that they were all in. And I didn't know that. But it was kind of weird how I ended up doing these things that I thought I had thought of to honor my family, but they had been doing it too. Now, the difference that I heard when they would throw money into the slab as they're pouring the concrete, they'd turn around and walk out. The employees would grab the money out of the slab. And that's why the employees were always there when they were pouring concrete. But I do think that those two things were really very special to me. And I really want to encourage people to go on that journey because you're going to learn some things that maybe you've always done it, but there's a reason why possibly.
I have so many questions about it's almost like there needs to be a Proler treasure map for all of their properties now. For all the slabs that they've put in over the years.
I'm sure that there are some, yeah.
You know, the shredder maps that you see now throughout our industry, there needs to be the Proler all-in maps. Robin, you've seen the technology come along from the Prolerizer and then what other companies have built upon the automobile shredder and what the Prolerizer did. Can you share some of the advancements that you've seen from that? What has been built off of it?
Sure. The shredder of today is so different than the original Prolerizer. And certainly I started at ISRI then in 1989 and went out and visited some shredders. And it's much different than it was back in 1989. I mean, just think about all of the post-shredding equipment that is now attached to a shredder. When we refer to a shredder now, we're not referring to just the hammer mill. It's the whole process in many ways. It's the eddy currents, it's the air separation technology that's added. It's all of the different technology that is added on in order to further separate the material and increase the yields and not just recover the ferrous, but recover the aluminum, the copper, the zinc. And, there's research being done about the plastics and how to recycle the plastics. So there is so much more being done now to refine. And when I say now, I mean over the years, there's been significant progress to increase more out of the car and the other material that goes in, as well as have higher purities and increased yields.
It's really fascinating to even see in my career what's been improved upon, even I'd say even in the past 2 years. The AI that's been starting to get into the downstream systems for these shredders has been fascinating to see that get added on to and refined to the point where you can find jewelry or coins, or you can down to the wire, literally, in some of these systems. And you just go back to the fact that we wouldn't have been able to do any of that if it hadn't been for
The
going
proller.
back to, right, the polarizer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all still based on that foundation.
Literally, the all-in foundation is what I'm going to
Yes.
refer to it. There were challenges from the Prolerizer era that probably do still persist in modern recycling. How do you see us addressing some of them? There's still probably some, I'll call them external perceptions that are still existing that we're obviously trying to address still today. Where do we go from here to help address some of those similar challenges?
Certainly, one of the challenges that has existed is true not just for shredding, but for other processing that's done by the industry is the fact that what we take in as our input material is designed by someone else. And that design changes continuously. And the composition of even the car continues to change over time. And so part of what we need to do, and it's one of our priorities at REMA, is to have that partnership and collaboration with automakers, appliance manufacturers, et cetera. So we're aware of what's in that car that is going to be shredded so that we can make sure we're either removing any potentially problem materials or we have the system set up in the downstream in order to effectively process that material. As we move more towards electric vehicles, we're going to see a dramatic shift again. So look at the batteries that are in the car currently, and then what's going to happen with the electric vehicle battery. And so that's, we're working closely with battery manufacturers, electronics recyclers, the shredders, car makers to figure out how best we modify processes in order to continue to evolve with the evolution of the car, as well as to make sure that we're recovering as much material as possible. That's just one of the challenges. There are other challenges I can talk to as well, but that's probably one of the biggest ones.
I agree that's the biggest one, probably the one that's the most challenging to solve as well. Just from an economic standpoint, it's difficult to get in front of those manufacturers and justify to them why you need to do this.
And another challenge, and one that we've been working on with our members and with our regions and chapters over the last few years and the program continues to evolve, is working with the communities that surround our facilities, the communities we're a part of, to make sure they understand what is happening within our facilities, the value, the economic and environmental benefit of the operations to the local communities. And so that's a big partnership and an ever evolving process for us as we continue to raise awareness about the importance of the recycled materials industry and what we bring to local communities, local economies, state economies, federal, and even international.
Becky, I'm sure your family's history has played at least some part in your current career and passion for what you're currently doing at Southern Core at SCR Recycling. I'm curious to know how the technological advancements that you're currently using has maybe some sort of roots or passion from the Prolerizer, from the familia ties back in the day.
I think it's natural for people to want to try to solve a problem. You don't have to be a proler to do that. You just have to want to solve a problem. And there's plenty of them out there, right?
Yes.
So I guess I never was afraid to try to do that. I've never really, my family and has always sort of instilled with us, don't walk away from something just because it's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. We're developing some technology right now and working and collaborating with not just the OEMs, but with the manufacturer of the equipment. And it's frustrating. And I can see why Sammy Proler decided to go the route, and my uncles and my father, in designing it themselves, because too many times they knocked on the door and were told, you can't do that, can't be done. You can't have a motor that's big enough that will shred a car in 30 seconds. They went to Lindemann, they went to American Pulverizer and knocked on the door and said, help us here. We're in the scrap metal business. We need help. We need to understand we've got a problem. Help us solve it. So, I think that's where my background has come from. Is there were plenty of failures and there will be plenty more failures, but the success that you have is so worth the hundreds of failures that you get. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is encourage people to try. And, I'm hoping that showing off this part of the recycling era is important to not only our past, but will, be inspirational to the future.
That right there is a big reason why the Smithsonian event and the exhibit is such a big deal, because our industry feels like it doesn't get enough awareness or credit for how long it's been around, especially when it comes to some of those buzzwords like sustainability and green. And yet, when you start showcasing some of the history of it, and you realize that these types of innovations and these collaborations and a lot of what you just talked about, working together on future advancements between manufacturers, equipment companies, and then what you're trying to ultimately achieve, which is basically zero waste, trying to essentially make sure that everything that has value can be reused, is finally going to be seen at a mass level where the full public can see it open on a day-to-day basis, unless, of course, it's a holiday and they're closed. It really is starting to feel like our industry is seeing the daylight from the everyday person to recognize like what we do, versus even 10, 20 years ago. It felt like people didn't really understand what we did.
5 years ago. One of the reasons why all of us at REMA are so incredibly excited about what's happening now with the Proler and with Becky's initiative, reaching out to the Smithsonian about creating this collection, is because of what you just said. It's an opportunity to broaden the exposure of the general public to all the different aspects of our industry, all the environmental benefits, the economic benefits, the societal benefits. And what's really interesting, and most people may not realize this, and to be honest, I didn't really understand it until we started working on this project. The Smithsonian is an incredible network. It has a huge number of collections of materials. And the vast majority of it is not on display. What it is it's a source of information, valuable data, valuable information related to so many things that researchers can access. So there is going to be now a metal recycling collection that can be accessible by academics, by the general public, by researchers around the world, that will be based at the Smithsonian and will grow over time. And there will be certainly objects from the collection, such as pieces of the Prolerizer, that will be on display at various times. But the focus really isn't on that display item, although the display item is phenomenal, is in that the latest figure I saw is that over 17 million people visit the Smithsonian each and every year. So that is a huge exposure for all of us about the industry. Not all of them are walking into the American History Museum, but a good percentage are. And so it's an opportunity to share the story about recycling and metal recycling in particular with that audience. But multiples of that are accessing the Smithsonian's collections for research. And we're going to be weaved into a number of stories that the Smithsonian is focused on. Stories about immigration into the U.S., and the history of immigrants in developing businesses within the U.S. and forming a foundation of our economy. There's a storyline around technological innovation that will be tied to, a storyline related to sustainability in manufacturing. that will be tied to for any research in that area, history of family businesses. There's so much that we're going to be tied into that will enable people to become aware of the greatness of this industry. And I'm just really excited about that.
Yeah, and I don't think Robin and I really knew. Sometimes you do things and you don't really realize what you've done until after you've turned around and looked. And that's exactly what happened here. I
Yeah.
was at a concert. I had gone to Kansas City. I had not been to the shredder in Kansas City since pre-COVID. And a real good friend of mine, John Rankos, passed away during COVID. And I wanted to go pay my respects. And I went over to the shredder. And at the time, the shredder was 59, 60 years old. And it was one of their best shredders still in the fleet. It was doing over 30,000 tons a month and more efficient than any of their brand new shredders. And John Rankos used to call me and tell me how much it had done every month and how proud he was of that particular shredder. That night, we went to an Indigo Girls concert. They were touring back. It was 2020. I was 59, getting ready to turn 60. Yes, Robin, we did make that. We did do that. The next morning, I thought to myself, because I had been told that they were going to take the Prolerizer down, that was the last one. And I thought maybe they wanted to sell it to me. And no, that's not what they wanted to do. They just wanted to tell me they were taking it down. So I woke up the next morning after hearing the Indigo Girls, and, I grew up with them. And I thought to myself, this needs to be in the Smithsonian. And Monday morning, I called Robin. Remember that? And I
did.
said, what did I say?
That you wanted to donate the shredder to the Smithsonian.
I think of the idea, could we do it? And you said,
I probably thought I didn't think it was possible, but we would certainly look into it.
no, you said, why not? That is what you, right?
Short. Okay, well, then I was better than I thought it was.
Yes. You said, why not? And there's a lot of times we do things in our lives. Why not? So this was a why not moment. And I will tell you that the curator that kind of has walked us through this told us she gets, is it 1,000 asks a week?
Yeah.
And she rejects 99% of them.
Wow.
Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've never really been in the 1% group for much.
What's amazing is when we started working with her, and it was Kathleen, how the energy and the excitement she has for what she's discovered about our industry. We're in it every day and don't realize how fast. I mean, it's in my blood. I do realize it now, and I wouldn't be here so long if I didn't love it completely. But for an outsider to be so passionate about it after only talking with us a few times and learning about it was just so exciting to see. And she helped drive this because they only make an announcement once a year with collections that they're going to start. And I think it's like 20 or 30 out of all the thousands that they get in. And it was pretty amazing. And I give Becky so much credit because the passion she's brought to this and the persistence, it's been phenomenal.
Well, I wanted to try and do this as quickly as possible. My mother is 91 years young, and, she is the last of her generation. So I wanted to try and get this done quickly. And what I've realized is nothing in Washington is done very quickly. But
No,
the passion that Robin and I had, and the curators that worked with us were some amazing people. They literally are the guardians of our history. They really are. And we have met some just truly fine people. It's been an experience that I don't want to do it again, but they walked all over the shredder in Kansas City. I mean, yeah, that's part of the deal is they actually go, they see, feel, touch, and hear everything. And then they
really.
we Houston, yeah, and walked all over our shredder. That's how you get them excited. But you have to do a lot of things to get them on a plane to come see you. Robert and I met with them the summer before, and I mean, it's a big process. But I think
It is.
both were very humbled.
And it is a long process, but it's certainly worth it. I mean, it's cool. Like the little triple major thinks it's really cool. But the other thing is that it has also triggered other opportunities. When we were walking around, we're going to host a celebration of the industry, actually next month, at the Smithsonian, connected to the unveiling of a collection. And right near where we're going to have the reception is something called Spark Lab. And it's basically for youth to get interested in basically innovation, STEM education, et cetera, but related to the mission of the American History Museum. And one of the things we've talked to them about is the Spark Lab will be open when we have the reception, but they're looking at developing activities for kids around recycling, maybe designed for recycling. And so we've had a long-standing partnership with Jason Learning on the K through 12 curriculum that we have, as well as other work we're doing with them, our annual video and poster contest. And so we're connecting Jason Learning, a nonprofit on STEM education that's been enmeshed in recycling now for 12 years, with the Smithsonian that will hopefully blossom into even more activities that will raise awareness about the industry. And this is also happening at the same time that we're launching a campaign around America's made out of recycled materials that will debut in Washington in February when we're all together. So there's a lot going on, and it's really very exciting. It really is. And again, I can't thank Becky enough for her enthusiasm, persistence, and leadership through all of this.
Thank you, Becky, for having the idea on this, because you could have easily just let that shredder get cut up and remelted, to be honest, right? It could have easily been in somebody's car or dishwasher or, you know,
Well, the one I will mention is our partnership with Nucor throughout this. They were so excited with the opportunity to be part of this historical part with the Smithsonian. And they have been nothing but supportive. They were the ones that donated the pieces of the shredder. They were the ones that allowed the Smithsonian to come and look and feel and touch. And the story is this partnership of steelmaking and recycling coming together, and the
That's
important. And America is such a amazing place that allows people to do this, to innovate, to solve problems, and to go beyond. I mean, we are the greatest country in the world, in my opinion. I'm just very, very lucky to have friends like y'all and a company and people that I work with. So, I mean, it really, there's a lot of people behind me, and the men and women who have run those Prolarizers over the years are very special to me. Very.
it's pretty incredible to see what your technology, your family's technology has built, led into what Nucor's been able to build with that technology, and then the support that they've provided as well. Kind of unintentionally, I guess I'm wearing the Nucor green today in honor of that.
Or I wasn't sure if you were being
Yeah, a little unintentionally. It just showcases, to your point, and circling back to what Robin mentioned earlier, the electric arc furnace, the way that we have the steel industry set up in the United States now is predominantly the electric arc furnace, which has a lower carbon footprint because it uses less energy, because it can, from recycled materials that come from machines like the Prolerizer. And it wouldn't have been possible to have that lower carbon footprint without things like that. Not only an economical opportunity, it also provides an environmental one at the same time. And it really does set up the United States to be in a very great position on a variety of fronts. Smithsonian's now going to be able to tell the masses that, no, we are in a really great spot for manufacturing, specifically metals. And we can do it from a very, I hate to use the word green, but I am wearing that jacket today.
But
Position.
Jennifer, I just want everybody to know, and you'll know this when you see the video that's going to be presented. The environmental impact has been around for a long time. People have been worried about environmental impacts for decades and decades. This is not something that is new to your generation. It was around in the 50s. And that's what you're going to learn. I mean, you're going to see a letter from Lady Bird Johnson to my uncles, thanking them for the auto shredder. So it's the environment, and you're going to see a watercolor that was done in the 70s by my family. They had an artist do it that talks about recycling and the environment. This is not a new buzzword. I mean, we've known about this. I do want to leave you with one quick funny story, though.
Yes.
So I had boxed up a bunch of the artifacts that I had here for the Prolerizer, paintings, drawings, pictures, stuff like that. And I sent them out last week to Washington, D.C. via FedEx. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Oh, no.
One of the boxes was received at the Smithsonian and the other one was not.
Oh,
So
no.
I called to inquire what happened to the box. The box that they received had been damaged slightly, looked like it had been through some problems. The second box is in Maryland at one of their stations, and it was also damaged. So, they're telling me, well, I need to file a loss on it, and it was insured. I'm like, you can't insure what I sent. No. But can you tell me what kind of conditions it's in? Because there are pictures. If the frames are broken, it's no big deal. At least I can get the artifact I want back. She said, she's putting me on hold, and she comes back and she said, oh, no, ma'am, it's damaged. I mean, we scrapped it. And I said, excuse me, you did what? And she said, we scrapped it. I said, do you even know what that word means? You scrapped it? Tell me what condition it's in. Can it be
Right.
salvaged? Because scrapped is not a word that you really understand.
Right.
And so they are trying to get back to me to find out if it was scrapped or salvaged.
Wow. And these were photos. And what about the original letter from Lady Bird Johnson?
That
Did
is
that make it?
at LBJ's library.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was never in these are pictures that they were news articles. I'm sure I can go back and they weren't the originals anyway. But I just thought it was funny that she used the word scrapped.
Right.
Shout out to FedEx.
We'll ask for a sponsorship after this gets edited.
I mean, we packed this thing. It was beautiful. I mean, you could have stored a crystal vase in there. And somehow they found a way not just to break it, but to tell me they scrapped it. So,
Yeah. No, it is infuriating to hear some of the metaphors that get associated with our industries that make it into mainstream
well, that we
terminology.
could have a whole nother podcast on, trust me.
Oh, for sure.
Robin knows all of them.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I really hope that they find everything that's been salvaged, saved to some extent. It's amazing what you can do with Photoshop these days. We can save it. Before we go, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to bring up from a particular topic or point about the Prolerizer, about the industry, about the event that's coming up next month, or technically maybe this month if we're releasing it in February?
I'll just add, first of all, congratulations on your new podcast focusing on advanced manufacturing. And it is so appropriate that we're here on this podcast talking about the Prolerizer, which is the foundation for so much innovation that has occurred in the industry. It's a great example itself of innovation over the years, but our industry is continually innovating and supporting the advancement of manufacturing, sustainable manufacturing, and that global supply chain. And so I appreciate the opportunity that we've had today to talk to you. And I hope that we'll have a follow-up maybe sometime in the next couple of weeks or months to talk about some other examples of what's happening in the industry that are promoting advanced manufacturing and the securement of our supply chain. So thank you very much and look forward to another discussion, hopefully sometime soon.
Jennifer, thank you again. I think this sheds a light on not just our history, but where we're going to in the future.
I do want to thank you both for coming on, and I do appreciate all of the information, the knowledge, the stories that you've been able to share with us today. It brings us to the end of today's Metals and Advanced Manufacturing podcast episode. A big thank you to Robin Wiener and Becky Proler for sharing their insights, stories, and expertise. It's been inspiring to reflect on the legacy of the Prolerizer and its transformative impact on the recycling industry, and discuss the innovation shaping the future of metals and manufacturing. And for those eager to see this piece of history up close, the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History will host a reception to officially introduce the Prolerizer into its collection at the end of February. It's a great opportunity to celebrate this milestone and learn more about the innovation that continues to drive our industry forward. So, thank you for tuning in. And as always, stay curious and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in metals and manufacturing. Until next time.